The massive chamber stretched out like a metal cavern, filled with beings from across the galaxy. Thousands of different creatures sat in floating pods that hung from the ceiling like strange fruit. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others looked like walking rocks or giant insects. The air buzzed with the sound of translator devices turning alien languages into words everyone could understand. Ambassador Zethka stood up in his pod near the center of the room. His blue skin gleamed under the bright lights, and his forearms moved in careful patterns as he spoke. The hegemony had ruled this part of space for over 1,000 years, and Zethka's people were used to getting their way. Fellow members of the Galactic Council, his voice boomed through the chamber, we gather today to solve the human problem once and for all. The word human made many beings shift uncomfortably in their seats. For the past 3 years, these strange creatures from a small blue planet had been causing trouble. They had spread out from their home world faster than anyone thought possible. They built colonies on dozens of planets without asking permission. They ignored the Council's messages. They acted like they owned the space they lived in. The humans must learn their place, Zethka continued. Every species that joins our galactic community follows the same rules. They give us 70% of their territory. They let us control their military forces. They pay taxes to the Council through the Tributary Commerce Accords. This is how peace is kept in the galaxy. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The rock-like Kranix delegation clicked their approval. The insect wrecks buzzed in harmony. Even the peaceful Altarians nodded their long necks in support. The humans have been given many chances to negotiate, Zethka said. They have ignored every offer. They have refused every meeting. Today we give them one final choice. Accept our terms or face the consequences. All eyes turned to a small pod in the corner of the chamber. Inside sat a single human woman. Ambassador Sarah Chen looked tiny compared to the massive aliens around her. She had short black hair and wore a simple blue uniform. She sat quietly with her hands folded in her lap, watching Zethka speak. Chen had been the human representative for 2 years. Unlike other species who sent large delegations with advisors and guards, the humans had sent just one person. She never raised her voice. She never made threats. She barely spoke at all during most meetings. This made the other species nervous. They were used to fear, anger, or desperate bargaining. Chen showed none of these things. Ambassador Chen, Zethka said, his voice carrying across the chamber, your people have exactly 1 standard day to respond to our final offer. Surrender 70% of your colonies to Council control. Place your military under our command. Accept our trade agreements. If you refuse, the combined fleets of the Galactic Council will force you to comply. The chamber fell silent. Every being in the room had heard this speech before. Sometimes it took years of negotiations, but eventually every species gave in. The Council was too powerful to fight. Their combined fleets could destroy entire solar systems. Their economic networks controlled trade across thousands of worlds. No single species could stand against them. Chen stood up slowly. Her pod rotated so she faced the center of the chamber. The silence stretched out until it became uncomfortable. Some delegates shifted in their seats. Others whispered to their advisors. A few species that communicated through color changes began to glow nervously. We decline, Chen said. Her voice was quiet but clear. The translator devices carried her words to every corner of the chamber in 1,000 different languages. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then chaos erupted. Delegates leaped to their feet. Voices rose in 12 different octaves. Some beings flashed angry colors. Others released chemical signals that made the air smell like burning metal. The insect wreck started buzzing so loudly that their translator devices overloaded. Impossible, shouted Counselor Thex from the Rigel Consortium. No species refuses the Council. They must not understand, called out Elder Vorth of the Crystal Collective. Perhaps their translation was wrong, but Chen just stood there calm and quiet, waiting for the noise to die down. She did not look afraid. She did not look angry. She looked like someone who had just ordered lunch instead of defying the most powerful organization in the galaxy. Security Director Vorthak activated his emergency protocols. His species looked like giant spiders, and all 8 of his legs moved frantically as he accessed his databases. In over 1,000 years of Council history, no species had ever simply refused the integration offer. Some had tried to negotiate for better terms. Others had attempted to form alliances before surrendering. A few had even tried to fight before being crushed. None had ever just said no. Ambassador Chen, Zethka said, his blue skin now darker with anger. Perhaps you do not understand the situation. The Council controls over 10,000 worlds. Our fleets number in the millions. Your species has less than 50 colonies and a few hundred ships. You cannot possibly believe you can stand against us. Chen looked at him with what might have been mild interest. We understand perfectly, Ambassador Zethka. You want us to give you most of our territory? Let you control our military and pay you taxes? We decline, but why? The question came from Ambassador Laren of the Centauri Union. Her species prided themselves on logic, and this made no sense to her. Every species negotiates. It is the natural way. You must want something in return. Better trade terms? A higher position in the Council hierarchy? Guaranteed protection? We want to be left alone, Chen replied. The simple answer hit the chamber like a physical blow. Beings who had spent lifetimes studying galactic politics, who understood the complex web of favors and threats that held civilization together, could not process such a basic statement. Left alone, Zethka repeated. That is not how the galaxy works. There are rules. There are procedures. There are consequences for those who refuse to follow them. Your rules, Chen said. Your procedures. Your consequences. She paused and looked around the chamber, making eye contact with delegates from a dozen different species. When she spoke again, her voice carried easily through the sudden quiet. You assume we want something from you. You assume we fear something from you. You assume we need something from you. These assumptions are incorrect. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Several delegates tried to speak at once, but Zethka raised all four arms for silence. Very well, he said. You have 1 day to reconsider. When the deadline passes, you will face the full might of the Galactic Council. I hope your people are prepared for the consequences of your pride. Chen's pod began to rotate back toward the exit. As it moved, she looked over her shoulder at the assembled delegates. We are not proud, Ambassador Zethka. We are simply not interested in your offer. There is a difference. The pod disappeared through the exit, leaving behind a chamber full of beings who suddenly realized they had no idea what to do next. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Galactic Council faced a problem they could not solve with threats or negotiations. In his security office, Director Vorthak stared at the data streaming across his screens. The humans were not mobilizing their fleets. They were not calling for emergency meetings. They were not even sending messages to potential allies. They were acting like nothing had happened at all, and that scared him more than any army ever could. Security Director Vorthak had not slept in 3 days. His 8 spider-like legs moved constantly as he paced around his command center, checking data streams from across the galaxy. His office walls were covered with screens showing military positions, trade routes, and communication networks. Everything was designed to track threats to the Galactic Council's power. But the humans were not behaving like a threat should behave. Show me the human fleet positions again. Vorthak ordered his assistant, a young Altarian with a long, flexible neck. The main screen displayed a map of human space. Red dots marked their colonies. Blue triangles showed their ships. According to Council intelligence, the humans had 47 worlds and roughly 300 military vessels. It was laughably small compared to the Council's might. Sir, the Altarian said nervously, the human ships have not moved from their normal patrol routes. No fleet concentrations, no defensive preparations. They appear to be conducting routine operations. Vorthak's mandibles clicked in frustration. Every species in galactic history had followed predictable patterns when threatened. They either prepared for war or desperately sought allies. The smart ones tried to negotiate better terms before surrendering. The stubborn ones built up their defenses and prepared for a siege. The humans were gardening. Explain this report from the Kepler colony, Vorthak demanded. Pulling up a surveillance file, the screen showed a human settlement on a world with purple skies and silver trees. The colony had been established just 18 months ago, yet it looked like it had been there for decades. Clean cities blended perfectly with the local ecosystem. Humans walked through parks filled with both earth plants and native species growing together in impossible harmony. Our observers report that the humans spend most of their time on agriculture and education, the Altarian said. They have built 17 schools in this colony alone. Their children learn both human subjects and native ecological systems. They show no signs of military buildup or industrial expansion for weapons production. That makes no sense, Vorthak muttered. They know the deadline is approaching. They know our fleets are mobilizing. Why are they teaching children instead of building weapons? The assistant pulled up another file. Perhaps more disturbing, sir, is this report from the border worlds. Human civilians have been visiting Council territories as tourists. Tourists? Vorthak's voice rose to a screech.
During a military crisis?
Yes, sir. They visit archaeological sites and ask questions about ancient ruins. They take pictures and collect soil samples. They pay for everything with standard credits and tip generously. Local populations describe them as polite and curious. Vorthak stared at the reports in disbelief. The humans were acting like they were on vacation, while the most powerful military force in the galaxy prepared to destroy them. A communication alert interrupted his thoughts. Ambassador Zethka's face appeared on the screen, his blue skin darker than usual with stress. Director Vorthak, I need an update on human military preparations. The Council is demanding answers. There are no military preparations, Vorthak replied. That is the problem. What do you mean? I mean they are not preparing for war. They are not seeking allies. They are not even sending diplomatic messages. According to our intelligence, they are behaving exactly as they did before we issued the ultimatum. Zethka's four arms gestured in confusion. That is impossible. Every species responds to pressure. Fear, anger, desperation, these are universal emotions. What are they feeling? Vorthak pulled up the psychological profiles his team had compiled. Our analysts believe they are feeling content. Content? They appear satisfied with their current situation. They show no signs of stress, fear, or anger. Their communications are filled with discussions about crop yields, school curricula, and scientific discoveries. They act like our ultimatum never happened. In the council chambers, emergency sessions had been running for 2 days straight. Delegates from hundreds of species argued and debated, but nobody could explain human behavior. Elder Vorth of the Crystal Collective had lived for over 800 years and witnessed the integration of dozens of species. His crystalline body chimed softly as he spoke. Perhaps they do not understand our power, he suggested. Some species lack the ability to comprehend large numbers. 300 ships versus 3 million ships. They may not grasp the difference. Counselor Thex disagreed. Our intelligence shows they have advanced mathematics. They understand scale. They built interstellar colonies. They are not stupid. Then they must have allies we do not know about, suggested Ambassador Quinn of the Outer Rim Coalition. Hidden fleets, secret weapons, something that makes them confident. Director Vorthak's latest report shot down that theory. We have monitored all human communications for months. They have made no alliance offers, no military agreements, no technology trades. They rarely even communicate with each other except for routine administrative messages. The debate continued through the night. Some delegates suggested the humans were bluffing. Others thought they might be planning a surprise attack. A few wondered if they had gone insane from the stress. Ambassador Chen's daily message arrived exactly at noon, as it had every day for 2 years. It was addressed to the council secretary and contained routine updates on human colonial development. Today's message mentioned successful harvest festivals on 12 worlds, the opening of 3 new universities, and a breakthrough in ecological restoration techniques. It did not mention the ultimatum at all. This is insulting, declared General Korax of the Hegemony Military Command. His warrior species had conquered dozens of systems through superior firepower. They mock us with their silence. We should attack immediately and show them the price of defiance. Patience, Zethka counseled, though his own patience was wearing thin. We have procedures, rules of engagement. The deadline is not passed. Rules they clearly do not respect, Korax shot back. How can we negotiate with beings who refuse to acknowledge our power? The question hung in the air because nobody had an answer. The entire galactic order was built on the assumption that everyone wanted something and feared losing something else. You could negotiate with greed and fear. You could make deals with ambition and pride. But how do you negotiate with people who act like you do not exist? On the human colony of New Eden, children played in gardens where earth roses grew beside alien crystals that sang in the wind. Their laughter carried across fields where farmers worked alongside native creatures that had learned to trust these strange visitors from the stars. Sarah Chen walked through the colony's main street, stopping to talk with shopkeepers and teachers. She bought fruit from a vendor and helped an elderly man carry groceries to his home. Nobody asked her about the Galactic Council. Nobody seemed worried about the deadline that would expire in 18 hours. "Mommy," a little girl asked as Chen passed by, "why do the star people on the news look so angry?" Her mother knelt down and smoothed the child's hair. "Some people get upset when things don't happen the way they expect, sweetheart. But that's their problem, not ours." Chen smiled and continued walking. Behind her, the sounds of a peaceful colony continued. Children learning, adults working, families living their lives without fear or hatred or the need to control others. In 16 hours, the most powerful military force in the galaxy would learn whether their threats meant anything to people who had found something better to do with their time. The galaxy held its breath and waited for an answer that would change everything. The deadline passed at exactly noon, Galactic Standard Time. Ambassador Zethka stood before the Council Assembly, his blue skin pale with uncertainty. For the first time in his long career, he did not know what to say. "The human deadline has expired," he announced to the chamber. "They have made no attempt to contact us. No surrender, no counteroffer, no response at all." Angry voices erupted from delegates across the chamber. Some demanded immediate military action, others called for economic sanctions. A few suggested sending a stronger ultimatum, but General Korax of the hegemony military stood and raised his weapon arm for silence. "Enough talk," his voice boomed. "They have made their choice. Now they face the consequences. I am authorizing the 7th Battle Fleet to demonstrate Council power. We will destroy one of their outer colonies as an example." Director Vorthak felt his mandibles clicking nervously. Something was wrong. His intelligence networks had been feeding him strange reports for weeks, but he had dismissed them as errors or exaggerations. Now facing actual military action, those reports seemed more important. "General Korax," he said quickly, "I recommend caution. Our intelligence on human military capabilities may be incomplete." "Incomplete?" Korax laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "They have 300 ships. We have 3 million. How incomplete could it be?" Vorthak's assistant brought up the files that had been bothering him. "Sir, we have several disturbing reports about human combat performance. 3 months ago, a single human frigate engaged a hegemony patrol squadron of 12 ships. And was destroyed, I assume," Korax said. "No, sir. The patrol squadron was disabled. All 12 ships lost power and communications. The human vessel suffered no damage." The chamber fell quiet. Korax's expression darkened. "That's impossible. Our patrol ships have superior firepower and shields. The human ship never fired a weapon, sir. According to survivor reports, their systems simply stopped working. Engines went dead. Weapons powered down. Life support switched to emergency backup. The human captain offered assistance and medical aid before leaving. More reports followed. Human cargo ships that outran military interceptors. Human colonies that appeared impossibly prosperous for their age. Human technology that seemed to work on principles nobody else understood. Perhaps most concerning," Vorthak continued, "are the reports from the archaeological survey teams." He brought up a map showing ancient ruins scattered across the galaxy. These sites had been known for thousands of years, remnants of the predecessor race that had built the original hyperspace network before mysteriously vanishing, human. Tourists have been visiting these sites with unusual frequency. They ask specific questions about the technology and architecture. Local guides report that the humans seem to understand the purpose of devices that have puzzled archaeologists for millennia. Elder Vorth's crystalline body chimed with concern. The predecessors disappeared over 50,000 years ago. No connection to humans is possible. But Vorthak was accessing deeper files now, records that had been classified for centuries. His 8 legs moved frantically as he pulled up data from the Council's most secure archives. According to genetic analysis performed when humans first appeared in galactic space, their DNA contains sequences that do not match any known evolutionary pattern. These sequences were classified as anomalous and filed away. The screen showed complex genetic charts covered in warning symbols and classification codes. However, if we compare these sequences to genetic material recovered from predecessor sites— Vorthak paused as the computer processed the comparison. "We get a 97% match." The chamber erupted in chaos again, but this time it was different. Instead of anger, there was fear. The implications were staggering. If humans were related to the predecessors, then everything the Council thought they knew about galactic history was wrong. Impossible, Zethka said, but his voice lacked conviction. The predecessors had technology beyond our comprehension. They built the hyperspace network that connects every star system. If humans had that knowledge, they would rule the galaxy. Unless, said a quiet voice from the back of the chamber, they chose not to. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Ambassador Laren of the Centauri Union, the logical species that prided themselves on clear thinking. Consider the evidence objectively, Laren continued. Humans appear in galactic space with technology that surpasses ours in subtle ways. They colonize worlds with impossible speed and efficiency. They show no interest in conquest or expansion beyond their immediate needs. They refuse our integration offer not from pride or fear, but from genuine disinterest. She paused and looked around the chamber. What if they already know they could defeat us? What if they simply choose not to bother? General Korak slammed his weapon arm against his podium. Speculation and fairy tales. I don't care if they're related to the predecessors. They still bleed. They still die. The 7th Battle Fleet launches in 1 hour, but Vorthak was still accessing classified files, and what he found made his blood run cold. Deep in the archives was a report from the first Council expedition to human space, filed by a junior intelligence officer and marked as unlikely requires verification. The report described the human homeworld Earth as being surrounded by a defensive network of impossible sophistication, devices that looked like simple satellites but generated energy readings beyond anything in Council databases. The officer had recommended further investigation, but his superiors had dismissed the report as sensor errors. General Korax, Vorthak said urgently, I strongly advise against military action until we can verify human defensive capabilities. Coward, Korax snarled. You see ghosts and legends where I see a small, stubborn species that needs to be taught respect. The 7th Battle Fleet was already moving. 300 ships representing the finest military technology of a dozen Council species, dreadnoughts that could crack planets, carriers filled with fighter craft, support vessels loaded with the most advanced weapons the galaxy had ever produced. They moved through hyperspace toward the human outer colony of Harmony, a small agricultural world with no apparent defenses. It would be a perfect demonstration of Council power. The colony's destruction would show every species what happened to those who defied galactic law. Admiral Thex commanded the fleet from his flagship, a massive dreadnought called Inevitable Victory. He had destroyed rebel fleets and conquered stubborn worlds across the galaxy. This mission should be simple. Arrive, destroy the colony, broadcast the results across human space as a warning. But as the fleet prepared to drop out of hyperspace, something strange happened. The navigation computers began reporting errors. The hyperspace engines started fluctuating. Ships found themselves pulled off course by forces that should not exist. Engineering report, Admiral Thex ordered. Sir, we're experiencing massive gravitational anomalies. The hyperspace network itself seems to be redirecting us. That's impossible. The network is fixed infrastructure. It doesn't change, but the evidence was undeniable. Instead of arriving at Harmony Colony, the 7th Battle Fleet found itself in empty space far from any star system. Their hyperspace engines had shut down completely. They were stranded in the dark between galaxies with no way to call for help or return home. Then a single human frigate appeared nearby, its hull gleaming silver against the stars. A communication signal reached Admiral Thex's flagship, not through their communication systems, which were dead, but somehow transmitted directly to his personal quarters. The message was simple and terrifying. You're using our roads without permission. That's going to be a problem. Back in the Council chambers, Director Vorthak watched his screens fill with impossible data. The 7th Battle Fleet had vanished. 300 ships and 50,000 crew members had simply disappeared from galactic space. And across the hyperspace network, ancient systems that had been dormant for millennia were beginning to wake up. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been running for 6 straight days. Delegates who normally spent their time debating trade regulations and territorial disputes now faced a crisis that threatened everything they understood about the universe. Director Vorthak stood before the assembly, his 8 legs trembling with exhaustion. The screens around him showed data that made no sense according to everything the Council knew about technology and physics. The 7th Battle Fleet remains missing, he reported to the silent chamber. All attempts to locate or contact them have failed. However, we have received one transmission. The main screen activated, showing Admiral Thex's face. The proud military commander looked confused and frightened. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship was dark except for emergency lighting. "This is Admiral Thex of the 7th Battle Fleet," his recorded voice said. "We are stranded in uncharted space. Our hyperspace engines are completely non-functional. Our weapon systems are offline. Life support is operating on backup power only." He paused, looking off camera at something. "We have been informed by human representatives that we are being held for traffic violations." The recording ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Traffic violations. The most powerful military fleet in Council history had been defeated and captured for traffic violations. "How is this possible?" demanded Councillor Thex of the Rigel Consortium. "The hyperspace network has been stable for thousands of years. No one controls it. No one owns it. But Vorthak was already bringing up new intelligence reports that painted an even more disturbing picture. Across the galaxy, ancient installations were reactivating. Devices that had been dormant since the predecessor civilization vanished were suddenly coming online. Our archaeological teams report unusual activity at predecessor sites throughout Council space, Vorthak said. Machinery that has been dead for millennia is now functioning. And in every case, human civilians were observed visiting these sites in the days before activation. Elder Vorth's crystalline body chimed with growing alarm. "What kind of machinery?" "Hyperspace regulators, network control nodes, gravitational manipulation devices. Systems that we always assumed were broken are now operational." Vorthak's mandibles clicked nervously. "We are beginning to understand that the hyperspace network is not natural infrastructure. It was built, and someone still knows how to operate it." Ambassador Zethka felt his 4 hearts beating too fast. The implications were staggering. Every ship that traveled between stars used the hyperspace network. Every trade route, every military deployment, every communication relay depended on it. If humans could control access to the network, they could cut off any world they choose, he said quietly. Isolate entire species. Control all galactic commerce. It gets worse, Vorthak continued. Our intelligence services have been monitoring human border activities. What we initially dismissed as tourism appears to be systematic reactivation of predecessor technology. Humans have been visiting sites across the galaxy for months, awakening systems that we never knew existed. The screen showed a map of the galaxy with thousands of red dots marking predecessor sites. Green lines connected them in a complex web that spanned every inhabited star system. It looked like a vast nervous system stretching across space. The entire galactic infrastructure is controlled by this network, Vorthak explained. Not just hyperspace travel, but also subspace communications, gravitational stabilizers for artificial habitats, and quantum energy distribution systems. Everything that makes modern civilization possible was built by the predecessors, and the humans have inherited the keys. General Korax's replacement, Admiral Vex, tried to salvage some military dignity from the disaster. We still have fleets in other sectors. We can blockade human space, cut off their trade routes. With what ships? Vorthak asked. Every vessel in our fleet depends on hyperspace travel. If humans can deny us access to the network, our fleets become collections of metal floating in empty space. To demonstrate the point, he brought up reports from across Council territory. Ships throughout the galaxy were reporting navigation errors. Some found themselves locked out of hyperspace entirely. Others were being redirected to unexpected destinations. A few had been gently deposited in safe orbit around uninhabited worlds with messages apologizing for the inconvenience. The humans are not attacking us, Vorthak explained. They are simply asserting control over systems that apparently belong to them. They seem to be taking great care to avoid casualties. Indeed, the missing 7th Battle Fleet was reportedly being treated well in their exile. Human ships regularly delivered food, medical supplies, and entertainment materials. The crew was even allowed to send personal messages to their families, though these were carefully screened to prevent military intelligence from being transmitted. But the real shock came when Ambassador Chen's daily message arrived. As always, it was addressed to the Council Secretary and contained routine updates on human colonial activities. Today's message mentioned successful integration of predecessor technology on 17 worlds, completion of 4 new ecological research stations, and an invitation. The human government extends an offer to all council species to participate in a cultural exchange program. The message read, "We believe there is much we can learn from each other about sustainable development, ecological harmony, and peaceful coexistence. Interested parties may contact our diplomatic mission for more information." The audacity was breathtaking. While holding the Council's most powerful fleet hostage and demonstrating control over galactic infrastructure, the humans were inviting everyone to a cultural exchange program. Ambassador Laren of the Centauri Union was the first to understand the true implications. "They're not trying to conquer us," she said slowly. "They're trying to teach us." "Teach us what?" Sethka demanded. "How to live without fighting, how to build without destroying, how to grow without taking from others." She gestured at the data on the screens. "Look at their colonies. Perfect ecological balance achieved in months instead of centuries. Their population growth is stable. Their resource consumption is sustainable. They have solved problems that have plagued galactic civilization for millennia." The truth was becoming undeniable. While the Council had spent thousands of years building an empire based on conquest and tribute, humans had quietly developed a completely different approach to civilization. They had technology that made warfare unnecessary, economy that made exploitation pointless, and social systems that made oppression impossible. "But why didn't they tell us?" asked Counselor Quinn. "Why let us threaten them when they could have simply demonstrated their power from the beginning?" The answer came from an unexpected source. A junior aide who had been quietly monitoring human communications spoke up from the back of the chamber. "Because they hoped we would choose to be better on our own," she said. "According to their internal discussions, they have been watching us for centuries, waiting for us to develop past the need for domination and control. They only revealed their capabilities when we forced them to." The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed this information. The humans had not been hiding from the galaxy. They had been waiting for it to grow up. "What do they want from us now?" Elder Vorth asked. Director Vorthak brought up the latest intelligence summary. "Based on their actions and communications, they want exactly what they said from the beginning. To be left alone to live their lives in peace. The difference is that now they have made it clear that they have the power to enforce that desire. And if we refuse, then we become irrelevant. They control the infrastructure that holds our civilization together. They have technology we cannot match. But more importantly, they have something we have forgotten how to build. A society that their people actually want to live in." The session continued through the night, but the outcome was already clear. The age of the Galactic Council's dominance was over. A new era was beginning, one where power would be measured not by the size of fleets or the fear they inspired, but by the ability to create something worth protecting. The humans had shown the galaxy a mirror, and the reflection was not flattering. Now everyone had to decide what they wanted to see looking back at them. 3 months after the 7th Battle Fleet disappeared, Ambassador Sarah Chen walked into the Galactic Council chambers for the last time. The massive room that had once buzzed with the arrogant confidence of 10,000 worlds now felt subdued and uncertain. Delegates spoke in whispers. Many seats sat empty as species reconsidered their participation in an organization that had proven powerless when it mattered most. Chen moved to the central speaking platform with the same calm demeanor she had always shown. Her simple blue uniform looked out of place among the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by other species. But nobody questioned her right to address the assembly. Everything had changed since the humans had demonstrated their true capabilities. "Fellow beings," she began, her voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. "I come before you today not as a representative of humanity, but as someone who has watched this galaxy struggle with problems that have simple solutions." The translation devices worked overtime as her words reached thousands of different minds in hundreds of languages. But there was something different about the way she spoke now. The careful diplomatic language was gone, replaced by directness that cut through the usual political nonsense. "For 18 days you have debated what to do about us. You have discussed military options that no longer exist. You have proposed economic sanctions against people who never wanted your economy. You have threatened consequences for actions we never considered wrong." Director Vorthak shifted nervously in his observation booth. His intelligence networks had been monitoring human activities across the galaxy, and what they found was both reassuring and terrifying. The humans were doing exactly what they had always done, farming, building, teaching their children, and taking care of their worlds. But now they were also quietly managing systems that kept galactic civilization functioning. The truth is, Chen continued, we never wanted to rule you. We still don't. Governing other species seems like a waste of time, when we could be growing better gardens or writing better music or teaching our children to love the stars. She gestured to the screens around the chamber, which now showed images of human colonies. Children of a dozen different species played together in parks that bloomed with flowers from across the galaxy. Humans worked alongside Altarians, Vrex, and even a few reformed hegemony citizens who had requested asylum after their government's recent collapse. But we also cannot allow you to continue threatening peaceful worlds, demanding tribute from species that never asked for your protection, or treating the galaxy like your personal property to be divided among yourselves. Elder Vorth's crystalline body chimed with what might have been resignation. His species had been part of the Council for over 1,000 years, but recent events had shown them the true cost of that membership. Half the Crystal Collective's worlds had declared independence and applied to join the human sphere of influence, where they could pursue their love of art and philosophy without being forced to support military actions they found morally repugnant. So we offer you a choice, Chen said. You can continue as you are, maintaining your council, collecting your tributes and threatening your neighbors, but you will do so without access to the transportation and communication networks that make interstellar civilization possible. The implications were staggering. Without hyperspace travel, the Council's far-flung empire would collapse within months. Species that depended on interstellar trade would face economic disaster. Military fleets would become isolated outposts with no way to coordinate or resupply. Alternatively, Chen continued, you can choose to join the community of worlds that have discovered there are better ways to live. Ambassador Zethka stood slowly in his pod. His blue skin had lost much of its luster in recent months as the hegemony faced rebellion after rebellion from worlds that no longer feared Council retaliation. What exactly are you proposing? He asked. Disband the Galactic Council. Release all species from the tributary commerce accords. Withdraw military forces to your home systems. Focus on taking care of your own people instead of controlling others. And in return, full access to technologies that will make your worlds more prosperous than they have ever been. Assistance in solving ecological problems, social conflicts, and resource shortages. Partnership with species who choose cooperation over conquest. She paused and looked around the chamber, and most importantly, the chance to be part of something bigger than yourselves, without having to dominate or be dominated. The debate that followed lasted for days, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Reports kept coming in from across the galaxy of worlds declaring independence from the Council. The hegemony's iron grip was crumbling as their subject species realized they no longer needed to fear military retaliation. Even some of the Council's founding members were quietly negotiating with human representatives about joining the new galactic community. The economic arguments were compelling. Human agricultural techniques could increase food production by 300%, while actually improving soil quality. Their manufacturing methods used 90% less energy and produced no waste. Their social systems had virtually eliminated crime, poverty, and social unrest without requiring any form of oppression. But the real convincing factor was much simpler. People who lived in human space seemed genuinely happy. The final vote came on a day when only half the Council delegates bothered to attend. Many species had already made their decision and were busy rebuilding their societies according to human principles. Those who remained were mostly die-hard supporters of the old system or species too proud to admit they had been wrong. The resolution to disband the Galactic Council passed by a narrow margin, but it didn't matter. The organization had already lost all real power. The worlds that chose to join the new galactic community continued to thrive. Those that refused found themselves increasingly isolated and irrelevant. Ambassador Chen's final address to the assembled delegates was brief and surprisingly gentle. Change is hard, she said. Admitting that you were wrong is harder. But growing beyond your mistakes is the most important thing any species can do. She looked out at the beings who had once commanded fleets and demanded tribute from entire sectors of space. We are not your enemies. We never were. We are simply people who found a better way to live, and we're willing to share it with anyone who wants to learn. The human delegation's pod rotated toward the exit. As it moved, Chen spoke one last time to the chamber. The universe is vast and full of wonders. There's room for everyone to find their place in it. You just have to stop trying to take someone else's. The pod disappeared through the exit, leaving behind a chamber that would soon be empty forever. Some delegates would return to their homeworlds and try to maintain the old ways. Others would swallow their pride and apply to join the community that was already spreading to thousands of worlds. A year later, Director Vorthak found himself working as a security coordinator for a mixed species colony in human space. His 8 legs, which had once carried him through halls of power, now took him through farms and schools where he helped ensure that children of a dozen different species could play safely together. He had expected to feel humiliated by the fall from his former position. Instead, he felt something he had not experienced in decades: peace. His job was no longer to spy on potential threats or plan for military actions. His job was to protect things worth protecting. Elder Vorth established an art colony on a world with 7 moons, where beings from across the galaxy came to learn and create without fear of war or politics. His crystalline body chimed with contentment as he watched students from species that had once been enemies work together on sculptures that sang in harmonies no single race could achieve alone. Even General Korax found a place in the new galaxy. His warrior species' natural aggression was channeled into competitive sports and rescue operations. Instead of conquering worlds, they saved them from natural disasters. Instead of leading armies, they led teams that competed in games that required all their tactical brilliance without hurting anyone. The 7th Battle Fleet was eventually returned to Council space, their crews unharmed but fundamentally changed by their months of exposure to human philosophy. Many requested to remain in human territory. Others returned home carrying stories of a society where strength was measured by what you built, rather than what you could destroy. Ambassador Sarah. Chen retired from diplomatic service and returned to her first love, teaching botany to children on a small agricultural world. Her students came from dozens of different species, all learning to grow things together in soil enriched by cooperation rather than conquest. Sometimes, on clear nights when the stars shone brightly through the classroom windows, she would tell them stories about the old days when people thought you had to fight to get what you wanted. The children would laugh at such a silly idea, unable to imagine a universe where beings wouldn't simply work together to solve their problems. And across the galaxy, in gardens that bloomed with flowers from 1,000 worlds, in schools where the children of former enemies played together, in workshops where beings who had once built weapons now created art, the new reality took root and grew toward the stars.